These are my orange and pecan biscuits, which taste delicious with a cup of tea or even a cup of coffee. With 36 cookies made in total, you'll be able to share them with your friends, family. Definitely irresistible, but such an easy recipe to follow at the same time. To make this recipe, you will need 225 grams of softened butter or margarine, 150 grams of caster sugar, 250 grams of self-raising flour, the grated rind of 1 orange, and then from that orange you need to juice half of the orange, so there's half of the liquid from the orange, and then 90 grams of roughly chopped pecan nuts, and then finally 1 small egg. So the first thing that we need to do for this recipe is to cream the butter and the sugar together. So I'm going to take the butter here and put it into the glass bowl. Any bowl will do, just one that's big enough to fit everything in. And then basically just put all of it in here, and then what I'm going to do before I add the sugar is cream it together a little bit on its own. Obviously you can use an electric mixer if you want, but this is quite an easy way to do it if you don't have one of them. So kind of go around a little bit like this. It doesn't really matter if it's really soft right now, but just kind of get it as soft as you possibly can. And then now what I'm going to do is bring across the caster sugar and simply put it in all together. And now I'm going to mix until it's fully creamed. So sometimes this takes a few minutes, but you really need to take your time just so it's all incorporated. You'll know when it's done when the mixture is light and fluffy. It will change colour a little bit, it'll go a bit lighter, kind of like a white colour. That means that all of the air is incorporated, and then once you've done that you'll be able to continue. So kind of keep mixing. So now I'm getting to the stage when the butter has gone a bit lighter in colour, and I think it's probably okay creamed like that. It seems absolutely fine. It's quite a smooth mixture as well. Make sure there's no big lumps of granulated sugar in there. You don't want big lumps of sugar throughout the mixture. When it turns out like it is here, I think it's time to continue to the next step, which is to initially prepare the wet ingredients. So in order to do this, I would personally take a jug. A regular Pyrex jug will do, or a plastic jug, anything that you can find. And the first thing to do is to crack an egg into this. You need both the yolk and the egg whites as well. Move that to the side, and then with your prepared orange juice, put that in there as well. Now we need to take a fork and whisk these together. It shouldn't take too long because there aren't really many wet ingredients, but mix it as much as you possibly can. And then you want to bring back over the butter and sugar mixture, and then basically just pour this in here all in one. It might look a bit disgusting to start with, but you basically just need to keep mixing and mixing, and it'll all become incorporated very quickly. Just mix as fast as you can, but be careful not to get the mixture flying out of the dish, as sometimes happens if you mix really fast. So just kind of mix at this kind of speed, and you'll see it's all already incorporated. It's already starting to come together. That's exactly what you're looking for. So keep going until it feels very thin and smooth. Just like when you were creaming the butter and the sugar together, it will change colour a little bit and it will go very smooth and velvety. It's not going to be an incredibly runny mixture like a cake would be, because obviously these are biscuits, so don't be surprised if it doesn't seem as wet as you would expect. Now what you need to do is to add the orange and the pecan nuts. So initially just take a bit of the orange zest. If you do it now, it just means that it's a little bit easier than doing it when you've put all of the flour in. Obviously the mixture is going to be a little stiffer when you've got the flour in, and you really don't want to kind of start mixing things into that. It makes it a lot harder. So get as many of the orange zest bits as you can, and then also take your bowl of pecans and add them as well. Now what we need to do is make sure that they're evenly distributed, so just keep mixing as much as you possibly can. And you can see it's so textured and it's so colourful. I can already smell the fantastic flavours of the orange and the pecan nuts as well, and I just think it's going to be a really tasty biscuit. So mix it as much as possible, and you can see that didn't take long. It was a very quick mix, and it's all relatively evenly distributed. And what we need to do now is add the flour, and you can sift the flour if you want, but I don't really think it's important to do that. It's a biscuit rather than a cake. It's not going to be as smooth anyway. So I would add it gradually. So maybe put about half of the flour in to start with, put the rest to the side and mix this as much as you can. And obviously it's going to turn into a dough, and you'll be able to feel it kind of forming the dough as you keep mixing. And this bit is probably going to be easier if you have an electric whisk, but if you don't, it doesn't really matter. I'm doing it absolutely fine with a wooden spoon like this, it doesn't take very long to kind of incorporate everything. This is a very, very easy, very, very quick recipe. And then just add the rest of the flour. As before, mix it, and it's probably going to take a little bit longer to mix this because obviously it's turning into a dough now. It's not as wet, so it takes a little bit longer to incorporate, but once it's in, it will turn into a dough. So now the mixture looks like this. It's actually time to move on to the next step. This is still kind of a wet mixture. It's not really, really doughy. So what I would recommend doing is putting this in the freezer for around 15 minutes, or maybe a little bit longer until it firms up a little bit. If you feel like you need a little bit more time for your mixture to set, you can get a little bit of cling film. Wrap all of this in the cling film and then keep checking it until it firms up in the freezer. So here I've got a little bit of cling film, and all I'm going to do is try and spread it out. Now cling film's horrible to work with, it'll start sticking together, but really as long as the mixture's covered, it doesn't matter if it's perfectly wrapped. It's only going to be in the freezer for a short amount of time. And then you just need to basically grab the mixture and put it onto the cling film. Get all of it out of the bowl, as much as possible out of the bowl. And then you might want to grab the fork you used earlier just to kind of get all the bits off. A spoon might be better actually, but a fork will do. Just to get as much of it as you can. When you've done that, you just need to wrap it up. Now it's quite a wet mixture, as I said before, so you know it's not going to look particularly appetizing when you do this, but it'll be absolutely fine as long as you cover it up properly. So kind of get it like this. If you feel like the top of it isn't sufficiently covered, like I don't feel like it is here, you can get a little bit more cling film and then add that over the top. I've got a little bit more cling film here, so I'm just going to basically put it over this bit, and then the mixture will feel a bit weird. But now I'm going to put it into the freezer for around 15 to 30 minutes. It should harden up a bit, and if it doesn't, you can just keep it in for a little bit longer. You'll know what it feels like when it's time to roll it out. It'll feel like a more traditional dough. So this mixture has now been in the freezer for 30 minutes, and to be completely honest, I'm not sure if it's working exactly as it should. And this really will depend on the amount of orange juice you had in, how big the orange was in the first place. If the orange was quite big like mine was, it may not look like it's particularly ready to roll. And this is absolutely fine, it's not exactly a problem, you just have to use a bit of guesswork. Put it back into the bowl that you used earlier, and then you can basically just guess and add a little bit more flour. So take it all, put it in, and it has firmed up a little bit, but it just needs a little bit more flour in there. In order to make it into a proper dough, if you don't feel like it's ready, you just need to guess and add a little bit more flour and keep mixing. I'm just going to take a little bit more self-raising flour here and put it in. And it doesn't matter if there's a little bit too much, because if you feel like you've added too much, you can just add a little bit of milk. But mix and mix around, and I can already feel that it is feeling a little bit more like a traditional dough. And this recipe just really depends on the amount of orange you've put in. Sometimes it won't come together as much as you want, so you just need to add a little bit more, and you know, just keep adding a little bit, you know, at regular intervals. And just guess, you know, this recipe doesn't have to be exact with the amount of flour you're putting in. You'll be able to tell when it's almost ready when the flour isn't really sticking to it anymore. There'll be a bit of flour in the bottom of the bowl, as you can see here. It's not really sticking to the mixture, so it's probably more like a dough now. So now what we need to do now is get the surface and basically just flour it and spread some flour all over. And this is really, really useful to do it in this way, purely because if the mixture is still quite wet, it will pick up bits of the flour. Now we need to take the mixture, and what I would recommend doing is not taking it all at once, purely because there's quite a lot in here and it will be very, very hard to work with it. So I would kind of spoon, kind of a big spoon like that, and just put it on the surface. I'm now going to clump it together like this, and then I'm going to turn it to the other side, spread a bit more flour around and get it like that, and put it into like a ball kind of shape. And this really does feel like the perfect dough right now. Because I added a little bit of extra flour, it's not too wet to work with, but again, it's still going to pick up a few bits of flour on the surface. You just need to take the rolling pin now and roll it up and down, up and down. Turn it around and go from the middle and go up and down again. Always go from the middle when you're rolling something out with a rolling pin. Go round and then go from the middle up and down. Keep turning it up and down. It's starting to stick a bit to the rolling pin, so now I need to add a little bit more flour. And don't be surprised, a lot of flour is always needed when you're rolling biscuits out like this. It doesn't matter if you add a little bit more flour, it won't affect the recipe. And then again up and down. What I'm going to do now I've rolled out the mixture is take a little cutter, press into the dough, go around a little bit, and you can leave it on the table for now and then take them off after. So kind of go around and make little circles. Sometimes they'll come off, but if you kind of leave them there, it means that you can pick them up easier in a minute. So just kind of get them like this and cut them. If you feel like this is getting a bit of dough on, you just need to wipe it and then cut again. So obviously here we have 7 biscuits that have been cut out, and I've got a baking sheet here, and it's just a normal tray with a bit of baking paper on. I haven't stuck it down with any oil purely because the biscuits will weigh it down. Put it next to it and then get a palette knife in order to transfer the biscuits. With the palette knife you just need to kind of get under the biscuit like that and put it onto there. So here you can see I have 7 biscuits. They're going to be absolutely delicious. And what I'm going to do now is put them into a preheated oven. The oven is preheated to 180 for fan. I'm going to put them in for around 10 to 12 minutes and check that they're golden brown. So I'm going to put these in now, and then whilst they're cooking I'm going to prepare the rest of the mixture. So basically, as you can see, the first batch are out of the oven now. They're golden brown, perfectly coloured, and what I've been doing whilst they were cooking was simply repeating the process of rolling the dough, clumping it together, cutting it out in pieces and things. The second batch are in the oven right now on the tray. They'll be out in a few minutes, and again I'll just put them on the cooling rack, and I'm just going to keep repeating the process tray by tray. I'm doing one tray at a time rather than doing numerous ones. I think it's easier to control. So here are some of the biscuits out of the oven now. In total I made 36, but here you can see 24, and there are so many to share with your friends and your family, and they will taste delicious. The orange, the pecan, you will absolutely love this flavour, and particularly if you have them with a drink of tea or maybe a cup of coffee, it will just be heavenly and you will want to make them again and again. So these are my orange and pecan biscuits. I really hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. Tell me if you're going to make them in the comments, and maybe leave any other requests for other things that you'd like me to bake. But until next time, thank you for watching and happy baking.